We have to go to Florida and drag them back to Alberta. Those were the words from Connor McDavid after Game 4's victory. Now let's go to Florida and bring in Ryan Rishaug and Chris Johnston. Guys, obviously they had to win to stay alive in the Stanley Cup final. No doubt about that. But I think there was a lot of significance in the number of firsts, not just the first win. It was the first shorthanded goal, the first power play goal, Connor McDavid's first goal of any sort in the Cup final, and Leon Draisaitl's first 2 points of this series. What was the most significant, apart from the victory, what was the most significant first you saw unfold in Game 4, Ryan?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I'll even add one to the list, and I know we're going to talk about this in a minute, but Bobrovsky being chased from the net was pretty significant too.
Yeah.
But if we're sticking to the Oilers, Gino, I would say that the big guns getting on the scoreboard in a meaningful way is the most significant thing to come out of that game. You know, those guys have had lots of chances. We've heard lots of talk about just need to bury. Well, finally they did. And if you look at the way some of those goals were scored, I mean, that was just flat out beating Sergei Bobrovsky with shots one-on-one. We saw, Connor McDavid was able to do that. So I think, CJ, the fact that the Oilers big guns with all the weight of the world and the pressure on in the world on their shoulders, for them to come through, and remember, it was the depth players that gave them the breathing room early in that game, kind of took the pressure off. Then the big guns got going, CJ. I think that was pretty significant.
Yeah, and I'll go with another first, Gino. The first small seed of doubt planted on Florida's side of the pasture here. I mean, look at the way the first 3 games went. I mean, I can understand why the Oilers look at those games and think they could have won one of them, maybe 2 of them. But from the Florida end of it, it just kind of went as it's been going all playoffs. They had reeled off 4 straight victories last round, 3 to start this round. Everything just felt a little too easy. Obviously, the games themselves, there's a battle within the game, but it was always ending up the way Florida expected. And that's the first time with all their friends and family having been flown in, obviously lots of thoughts and trying to push away the thoughts of what could be. And they didn't just lose. I mean, they fell flat on their face. And so now they've got the first little bit of pressure on the Florida side in this series, and I think that is significant.
I'll give it an honorable mention, Gino. The power play. Now, there is some debate whether a 5-on-3 power play goal gets them off the schneid, so to speak. Paul Maurice didn't think so. He was kind of like, I'm not counting that 5-on-3. I asked Draisaitl that today. He kind of hummed and hawed about it a little bit. But I think the fact that the power play was able to put one in, even though it was 5-on-3, I think one of the other things we saw is Florida kind of calmed down the rough stuff late in that game after it got out of hand. And my guess is Paul Maurice and his group are thinking, why give their power play any more free practice to help it sharpen up a little bit? But the fact that they got one, I think, mattered, Gino.
All right, let's get to the elephant in the room now, Bobrovsky getting chased from that game. So now the question becomes, and I'm interested to see your take on this. I'll give you my take. Are we going to see bounce-back Bob the way we've seen in these playoffs so far? He loses, then bounces back big. Or are we going to see bubble burst Bob the way we saw in last year's Stanley Cup playoffs? Let's not forget, Bobrovsky through 3 rounds in last year's Stanley Cup playoffs, he was amazing. He might have won the Conn Smythe if they had gone all the way. His goals against just over 2. But then in the Stanley Cup final, his goals against ballooned to almost 5, and he was a big part of the reason they got knocked out in 5 games. What's your take, guys? Is this bounce back Bob we're going to see in Game 5 on Tuesday, or bubble burst Bob?
CJ?
Well, if I knew, I would just sit at home and place a large wager on what's going to happen. But, I mean, I will say this. It did cross my mind, Gino, what you're alluding to. I think Bob was somewhere around an .820 save percentage in the Stanley Cup final last year after being the main reason the Panthers got through the previous rounds. And over the years, the one concern about him that Florida's had is they find when his workload gets to a certain spot, he has trouble pushing through. And so I don't know if he's hit that spot. I don't know if that's what we attribute this to. I mean, certainly the Oilers had some odd man rushes on the goals that were scored against them, had some pretty good looks. But, let's face it, he was unbeatable in Game 1. Made some ridiculous grade A saves, stopped a breakaway or partial one. Game 2, I mean, he was maybe getting to the point where he might have been in the Oilers shooters' heads. That is 100% no longer the case after they put 8 pucks by him in the last, 4 periods that he played.
And on the flip side, you got Stuart Skinner, who, I mean, not a lot of attention on him after that win. So much focus was on the Oilers' offensive outburst. But Stuart Skinner made some great saves. And even though the game wasn't close, he made some great saves in the third period too. Really sharpened up his game. And I think that will definitely, help his. He talked a little bit about that today. It'll help his confidence moving forward here, Gino.
All right, we've seen that Knobloch is not afraid to make major changes. He did it right in the middle of the Western Conference Final major shakeups. Now, I assume, given the fact they're coming off that enormous victory, that Connor McDavid comes in a full black suit. Once again, that gray suit is now toast, and there are no changes in the lines. What did you see in the skate?
Yeah, pretty much exactly the same, and that's what you would expect. Knobloch doesn't like to change a winning lineup. Now, that's not to say that the Oilers don't feel that there's more room for improvement here, though. Leon Draisaitl talked today that this group feels like there's another level for them, even though they pushed forward with 8 goals in the last game. I think we talked about their power play, right? There's room for improvement in their 5-on-4 scenarios. And Leon Draisaitl, Gino, I mean, he's got 1 goal in his last 9 games. He's got 5 points in his last 9 games. Like, that is not Leon Draisaitl playoff performance. So he was open to discussing his own game today and the things that he's working on. He talked about wanting to do a better job using his feet, trying to create opportunities with his feet. He knows that there's more to give. Now, I will submit, CJ, I don't think he's healthy. I think he's been playing something since probably the midpoint of the playoffs, but still very much looking in the mirror today was Draisaitl.
Well, at least he was on the ice. You look at the Florida skate, and they don't have Matthew Tkachuk. They don't have Sam Bennett, 2 of their top forwards. And of course, they're due to play in this next game, but I think it's a hint, given that there are double off days here, that those guys are probably battling something themselves, a little bit of extra maintenance on the Panthers end of things. And I mean, that's a tough part. I mean, look, it's going to be June 18th when this game is played. See, these guys, they reported for training camp basically 9 months ago, mid-September.
And the Oilers all showed up a month early.
There you go. So, these guys are almost looking at a full calendar year at this point. So, it could catch up to either team at any point in the series. Like, it sounds funny. We just saw this game. But, the finding energy, finding your way through whatever everyone's dealing with is part of the attrition to win the cup. And so extra focus on Florida's end now because maybe they're not quite as healthy as I had thought previously.
What about this whole idea of you got to lose before you win? The Florida Panthers keep referring back to the fact that because of what happened to them in the Cup final last year, they're a completely different team. They've learned from it, and now they're ready for anything. But Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, Zach Hyman, we've heard them repeatedly say, we've gone through our bit of a storm as well. You saw the way we started this season. We overcame the really rough start that we were way out of a playoff spot, made the playoffs. We knocked off teams we should never have knocked off in the playoffs. Ryan, you've seen this team go through this. Connor McDavid says, I love when everybody gives up on us because then we get a chance to prove them wrong. Have they gone through enough of the fire now that they can indeed be resilient and make this not just a 5-game series, but potentially put a real scare in the Florida Panthers?
Yeah, I mean, the Oilers have the ability in that locker room. I think we've all seen that they can give the Florida Panthers a heck of a game, and they now have shown they can beat them. By the way, that was the first time this season that they'd beaten them because don't forget they lost twice in the regular season. Yeah, Gino, they've been through a lot. They don't want to have to go through the Florida experience. They don't. They would like to think that getting face punched by Nathan MacKinnon in the Colorado Avalanche, swept a couple years ago, and then massive disappointment at the hands of the Vegas Golden Knights last year, that those two will be enough. That will be enough pain, enough heartache that they don't need to experience having a Stanley Cup slip through their fingers as well. That's what they're hoping. The Florida Panthers have been there, CJ. They've felt that. I thought they were a little nervous. Their first chance to actually win a cup, with it in the building, the possibility to get it out of the case, they were maybe a little nervous. I would expect Florida to have that part of their game dialed in.
Sure. I mean, this is much more comfortable playing here. The second time they're going through it, even just in a matter of days, where you're playing a game where you can win a cup. I don't buy that you have to lose to win, though. I mean, maybe on large scale for sure, but the losses you mentioned for Edmonton should be learning tools enough where they've arrived at this playoffs better prepared to handle all the twists and turns that every playoffs take if you play long enough. Colorado won their cup, as you mentioned, Ryan, 2022. They never lost in a final with the Nathan MacKinnon-led group prior to that. I don't think it's real. And do you know what's funny? Just as a newcomer kind of around the Oilers on a day-to-day basis, I get the feeling from a psychological standpoint that these aren't just nice quotes in the media, that they almost do relish the challenge of, clearly they wouldn't have wanted to lose the first 3 games, but when they did, they relished the challenge of maybe having a chance to prove once again they can do it. I mean, Connor Brown said actually after the last game when they won 8-1, he said, it would only make sense for us to win a cup this way, the way the years got. He said, it would only make sense for this group after pulling out of basically last place, early in November, but being down against Dallas, being down against Vancouver in this playoffs, to do something that hasn't been done since even before you were on the network, Gino, coming back from 0-3 down in the cup final.
Gino's always been on TV. Since the beginning of TV, Gino has been on TV.
What can you tell me about the 42 Maple Leafs, Gino?
Swimmingly. That was okay. You want to refer about
it.
the 42 Leafs? Is that what you want to talk about? You know what? I'll go back, not quite as far back as that. Only 3 teams in NHL history have ever forced a Game 6 after going down 3-0. The last team to do it was 2012, which wasn't that long ago, CJ. I was in the business already 25 years.
Weren't you teaching broadcast back then, Gino? Wasn't that weren't you teaching?
Oh, man. You know what? It was going so swimmingly, and then all of a sudden it took a hard left turn. It's my fault. I opened up a can of worms.
One thing quick, we can be a little goofy here on YouTube. So we got to give a little bit of love to Dave Parker, our camera. So Parker, can you kill the lights? Kill the lights, Dave. So Gino, this is what our hit could have ended up looking like today. We arrived last night like 11:30 at night, and Dave Parker, none of his lights were here. So he had absolutely no lights to do our hits with today.
I saw you in the airport looking for the luggage.
So this morning, Dave is like wandering around from camera crew, like, do you have lights we can borrow? He was walking around the arena this morning begging for lights. So that's what our hit could have looked like, but it paid off. He got us lights, and so the thinning hairline can be clearly seen now, thanks to all these lights.
We can't see it. Is that just like 47 iPhones with their flashlights shining on you guys? Is that what you end up doing?
He's got big, beautiful lights that he borrowed. Yeah, he gave up his per diem money and rented them.
No, listen, I've worked on the road with Parker alongside of you. Parker can save the day, but he's not giving up his per diem money. You and I both know that. Guys, thanks a lot for this. I appreciate it. We'll talk to you again tomorrow before Game 5.